They say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. Well, I'm going to talk to you about a few things that I believe I have spent just that much time in and personally feel I've mastered. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yeah, I'm talking about things that I've mastered. I believe that there are some things that I've gotten to the point of mastery at. I'm not going to say that there aren't people who have maybe done better at these things than I have. Sure, there must be. But I know for certain that I'm at a level that is better than most at certain things, at certain items that I can do. Other people can't. And I feel that everybody has things that they have gotten to a point where they have mastered it so well that there aren't many people who are as good at it as they are. And today, as I record, it's December 2nd, 2025. This is episode 237, and I'm going to talk about those things that I have personally mastered. And hopefully, anybody who's listening to this will stop for a minute and think about the stuff that they have actually done for an extended period of time that they might not even be aware of that they have actually, or you, excuse me, have actually mastered. You don't even realize it sometimes that you've gotten so good at something that you really have mastered it. And nobody really pays any attention to that. And I think that I'm bringing it to light because I think I kind of needed to know that I'm actually as good at some of these things that I am, and I want to bring it up to the forefront. And I think that at the same time, other people should really consider that as well, because there are things, like I said, that you just do and you don't really pay attention to, and yeah, it could be a hobby, it could be your job, it could be anything, but you're just really good at it, and other people around you may know that you're really good at it, but sometimes you don't really see it. And I think that everybody should know what they're good at. Example, something that I always like to say, and I say it in jest because I use it as a mental way to sort of break up monotony of things that I'm doing. I would say a lot of times, there's one thing that I know for sure, and that is I know that when I failed. Some people say, what do you mean by that? Well, for me, I think that the biggest currency in the world is time. And granted, there are certain things that people will continue to do, continue to do, continue to do, continue to do, and eventually it may break through with it. But for me, I take time as such a premium, and I don't like to waste it if necessary. So for me, to know when I'm at a point where I just can't quite get over the hump at something and I should maybe try something else, I think that's something that was good that I mastered. Not even anything that's going to be part of the show, but it's certainly one of those things. And I'll get into that a little bit. Example, you work at a job for a while and you get to a certain level. For me, it was when I was working at Wawa. There was a point where I was a manager and I was the lowest level of management. And I was getting really good at what I was doing at that level. And then there was a point where I actually pretty much knew the assignments and the things that were necessary for somebody at the next level, which was an assistant manager. And I knew it so well that um, I had managers at a time who actually asked me to help incoming assistant managers, or what they called the position assistant in training, or AIT. And I would help train them on things that not only that I knew, but things that I knew that they should know. And I did it for the first time when again, I was young and dumb. I know I'm getting a little elaborate into this, but The idea was I helped train these assistant managers to a point where I realized, hey, you know what? If I'm training them, I should be one. And I asked around, and I never got any feedback from anybody saying, yeah, we'll make you an assistant manager. And I did that for probably, I don't know, 6 months to a year after I had trained two others to do the work that was above me. And that was part of the reason why I was like, yeah, I gotta go. I can't continue to train people in a job that I'm very capable of doing and not be allowed to do it. I knew at that point at Wawa, well, I'm not getting any better. I'm not going any further, so I need to stop. So I knew that at this point, I need to leave. And I think that understanding that and have mastered that fact that I get to a certain point in certain things and like, I'm not going any better, not going any further, let me get out of here. And I continue to chip away at that stone. At this point, I've been away from Wawa almost 20 years. And I would say that, in my personal opinion, I would have still been at that level of management where I was, or I would have gotten so tired of being at the point where I was helping others who were above me that I would have lowered myself back down to the lower level again, out of pure frustration, and that wouldn't have been good. But that's one of the things that I feel that I've mastered, and it's not quite. I could have probably gone a little bit more into it if I put it in the main event, but it just dawned on me that that's what I wanted to talk about, just to give you an idea. And I think that other people out there have other talents that they have mastered, and they haven't, not necessarily fulfilled that mastery. They're at that point. They're as good at it as they'll ever get. And they're better at it than most people will ever be. But sometimes they just don't really realize it. So, if for no other reason, I'm going to tell you the stuff that I've realized that I'm really good at. And I want you to think about the stuff that you're really good at. All right. On that note, it's time to fill in the blanks. A very interesting question that I'm asking right now for fill in the blank, and it's a unique one that is literally unique to me, and it's because of the art that's behind me. You see those paintings that are back there? I have some all over. This is my living room. I've got paintings all over that I've made. I'm looking around. I probably have about 30 of my paintings hanging on the walls. And one thing that I've done is, which I'll elaborate a little bit more about when it comes to my painting, but in this wave of paintings, which is really a permanent wave now, there was a point in time that I did a few earlier ones, and during those earlier paintings, I just painted them and moved on. But now I have these paintings, and I'm real specific because I'm looking to sell these paintings. I think they're decent, personally. Pat on the back. You see, it's getting a little easier to do that. But the question is, because each of these paintings I've made over the last 3 years, I sign them, I date them, I put little cards behind them representing what I think the painting is. So you know how some people, when they look at art and they say, hey, what did the artist think when they were drawing it, when they were painting it? Well, it's not a mystery to any of my paintings, because each one of my paintings has a little card that tells you what I was thinking when I made it. Some of them are very elaborate, some of them are very short, but that's neither here nor there. The question is the fact that every year since, well, I guess it would be 2023, 2024, so the last 3 years, I have been dating these paintings so that, for if no other reason, I knew when I made what I made. Excuse me. And during that time, I used a specific color to represent each year that I painted with. 2023, I used a black Sharpie. 2024, I used a pale lime green Sharpie. This year, 2025, I've used red. So realistically, my question is, what color will I use for 2026? And the answer to that fill in the blank question is, at the moment, I have three colors that are popping in my mind. Three. And amongst these three, I'll probably have to make up my mind, obviously, by the end of the month, because it'll be 2026. And the colors that I'm considering for 2026 are going to be, drum roll, I'm thinking dark purple, dark blue, excuse me, or orange. So, the question was, what color will I write the date on my next year's paintings of 2026? And I've chosen three that I'm considering: dark blue, dark purple, or orange. Those are really the three that are in my head. And one of them's going to win, and I'm going to have to figure it out, like I said, in the next couple weeks. And that's the end of that. Now it's time to ring the bell and go to the main event. Okay. Things I have mastered. Which is kind of weird because I actually thought of one more, and I don't know if I'm going to put it into the show now or not. And I think I'm going to, because realistically, it's one it's a fact. I mean, again, this show is a little bit narcissistic, but at the same time, like I said, for me telling you the things that I believe that I have mastered should make you think about stuff that you have mastered, which is ultimately the goal of the episode. Not to just bloviate about how great I am at certain things. It's to tell you that I understand that I'm good at these things, and I'm going to continue to work on these things to get better at it. And I think that you need to look at yourself and see the things that you're good at. Now you want to keep reiterating that. It's not just me bloviating about I am the greatest at these things and no one can touch me. And as a result of that, I'm going to start with one that it's not even on my notes. So I'm going to completely ad-lib this one because I only thought about it when I got out of the shower just a couple minutes ago. I've mastered driving. I have. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm not too bold to believe that that is the case. I believe that I have absolutely mastered the art of getting behind the wheel of a car and driving it. Let me explain why I believe that that is the case. I can start by saying I can count on one hand the amount of people that I personally know or have known that I'm convinced are better drivers than I am. Convinced. 100% convinced that are better drivers than I am. And I'll even go as far as to say who they are. Number one, well, no in particular order. Well, actually, if I was going to put particular order, there is one guy who I've known who absolutely, I haven't talked to him in years. In fact, he was a little kid when I first met him. But he's absolutely the best driver I've ever personally known. Even for a second. And we used to go, he was at my bus stop when I was a kid in my sophomore year of high school. And I know for a fact that he is definitely a better driver than I am, by far. But truthfully, I would say the people who I know that are better drivers than I am would have to be, I guess, Paul Long for sure. He worked in auto shops longer than I have, and he has driven a variety of vehicles, much like me, but he owns a variety of older vehicles from the 70s, stuff that I've never even driven. So just by nature of that alone, I'm pretty sure he's a better driver than I am. Another person is my Uncle Willie. He was a police officer, so he learned the police training on how to drive a vehicle like that. And for sure, he is absolutely better than I am. The other two people who are in my list, other than number one, that I'm 100% convinced are better drivers than I am, both of them have passed on. And as a result of that, I can't necessarily say that I could even come close to either of them. One of them was Master Tech Jimmy Lawrence, absolutely better than me. And the other one would have to be my stepfather, Roger Johnson, who was in the military, and he drove a lot of different vehicles throughout his entire lifetime. Two guys, better drivers than me, by far. But the person who's on my list, and I want to get a kick out of this. I smile because I remember him when I believe he was in 7th grade, and he was at my bus stop when I was in 10th grade going to good old Southern Regional. There's no doubt that he's a better driver than me. And the reason for that is because, well, he won a NASCAR championship. Martin Truex Jr. How can I hold a candle to a guy who won a NASCAR championship? There's no way. That guy, 100% better driver than me. Now, why do I put myself in the position to even say that I am that I've mastered driving? Well, for one, I understand the rules. You have to understand the rules. And I've driven outside of the rules several times. In my young dumb days, you could say that I drove in a manner that could only be described as questionably legal. And I was fairly successful, let's say 56 times I drove in situations of questionable legality, and I was successful 55 of those times. We're going to leave it at that. The young dumb days, let's just say that I was able to control my vehicle at a speed of around 127 miles an hour for a sustained period of time amongst those 55 successful ventures a good number of times. Other times there were more endurance and I didn't have to go above 80. But I did drive at a very high rate of speed and executed things that probably would be, again, as I would describe them best, as questionably legal. And that's where I'll leave it. I'll also say that during that time period, I learned how to drive a manual transmission or a stick shift. And that's one of the things that this day and age, they barely exist. I mean, it's almost like if you didn't learn how to drive a stick shift car, I'm going to almost say before the year 2010, you're probably not going to. I just feel that that's what it's going to look like. And it's hard pressed for me to say that the average bear is going to even get the opportunity to do that. Excuse me. Had to do something real quick. Hopefully, it didn't show up on the screen. If it did, it did. But that's the way it is. I forgot to get rid of my notifications to do the show. But they're gone now. But anyway, I was talking about manual transmissions. The fact that I know how to drive a stick. That makes me a better driver automatically than probably everybody from the age of 30 to 17 right now. Like, automatically. Just immediately. Then there's the fact that I also passed CDL training. My first, my first attempt at the driving test, as well as the regular auto test, passed it the first time. In a vehicle, mind you, that I had never driven before, my aunt's minivan. I can also say that in that CDL training, I drove 1, 2, 3 specific different size buses during that training period. So the fact that I can say that I've driven multiple buses, and as a result of the fact that I was a mechanic, I was in and out of, I don't know how many different vehicles, cars, trucks, SUVs, hybrids of all different sizes, from a smart car to a really big monster truck almost. And I've owned several vehicles, and I've driven different size vehicles, and I've driven in multiple weather conditions, multiple elevations. Two of my favorites were heavy snow, and I wasn't sure about that one because I had just gotten into my Z28 Camaro 85 with the 4-barrel carburetor and the 350 engine, and I wasn't really sure about how I'd be able to handle that in the snow. And so I put myself in a snowy weather condition, which was snowing that day, probably a couple, 2-3 inches of snow on the ground. Went to a parking lot that was pretty much empty, and I put myself in a spin, and I said, okay, we're gonna figure this out. Are we gonna be able to work our way out of this in this manual transmission vehicle? And I did. Successfully, was able to catch myself, was able to straighten myself up, and was able to have no incident. Another thing that allows me to believe that I have actually truly mastered the art of driving is the fact that, like I said, when I was driving in those ways of questionable legality, I understood when and where and how to do it. And as a result of that, when I drive down the road now and I see people driving in a manner that I would consider, and usually the police would consider, reckless, I understand that there are situations that require that. There's certain times when you're driving down the road and you're going to need to go faster in order to avoid a problem. You're going to need to be able to use your mirrors and know that you've got enough space to quickly adjust your steering wheel to move in a direction so that you can avoid collision. You got to be able to know that. And you got to be able to do it. And fortunately for me, I have that ability. And then my favorite example of how good I feel that I am as a driver, and this one, you may consider this a vanity thing, a little narcissistic, but here it is. Lennox Lewis once said in an interview that I watched him at, he got into a street fight, and when he was in that fight, The guy was throwing punches left and right. And of course, Lennox Lewis, undisputed champion at one point in his career. Dude was throwing punches at him, and in the middle of the fight, Lennox Lewis said, I'm paraphrasing him now, everything kind of slowed down, and he realized that this dude he was fighting was nowhere close to as good a fighter as he was. He just had way better skills, and he was doing things that this guy couldn't even touch him. He didn't even hit him. And Lennox Lewis finally just knocked him out. I've had experiences like that on the road multiple times when I see people doing things, driving out of control, running really fast, just moving in and out of stuff. And my personal favorite thing is I'm watching them do all this, and there have been several times when they tried to get around me and do things like that, and I would allow them to do so, and I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna just show them the error of their ways by driving intelligently and wisely. I ended up, when I choose to do it, which is another thing, showing myself to be in front of that person who was driving tremendously erratic. If they had just slowed down, used their good judgment, if they had any, they'd have realized that, yeah, you don't have to do that. It's sad, but it's so true. I believe that I have that instinct at times where, like, oh, hey, it helps to be able to understand the rules and know how things work. And of course, there are some physical things that, of course, at 47, those things, I might only have those specific gifts another, hopefully 20, 25 years, but I don't know. Age and attrition, they're, as they say in wrestling, Father Time does no jobs. I have really, really good peripheral vision. And by a force of an accident, I scratched the cornea in my eye, which kind of helped me do things in the legal, what do you call it, questionable legality driving that I used to do, where I can see the light change a little faster than people can. I just can, because there's still a light sensitivity, and when I see, like, I can see when levels of light change faster. I just can. And so when the light is red, it's like immediate. I see the light get slightly dimmer, and I can already hit the gas, and I'm ahead of you. It gives me an advantage off the line. Just saying. It's just a physical perk of a horrible accident. Helped me 55 times, I'm just saying. But anyway, I believe that I've mastered the art of driving in that regard. Going to talk about painting for a minute. I have, in my retirement, been painting a lot. Like I said earlier, my walls right now have probably 30 paintings on the wall. Easy. Just a quick guess. It's like 30. Not to mention the ones behind me. Just behind me, there's 2, 4, 6, 8 that are just sitting right behind me. And there's at least another 10 between the kitchen and the other part of the living room, and there's another at least 10, 12 to my right. Or actually, my left. Yeah, my left. And there's no doubt that I've put in some time. I've put in a lot of time. I'd sit there and I would just paint. I'd watch all kinds of shows, or the shows would be watching me as I'm putting paint to canvas, or putting graphite to canvas before putting paint to canvas. And sometimes it's thoughts that pop in my head, things that I see, things that I want to see. And I just create this stuff just because of what it is. And I just have gotten to the point where I feel that there was a point where I said, this is but so good. But I'm really, I guess, starting to appreciate my own work. Took me a little while. It really did, because I thought the simplicity of it was just that. I mean, I've seen people take a single piece of charcoal and do a black and white painting, not painting, but a drawing of a perfect human face that legitimately only lacked the flesh. And I say, well, now that's good. This stuff that I'm making, what is that? I think I could literally throw my cat in a washing machine. No, not a washing machine. Cover my cat in paint and let him walk on the canvas, and it would look similar to what I've made in some of these paintings. Let's face it. That's the nature of what I do. And when I realized that that's really what I do, I began to embrace that. Because, well, am I going to be the person who's going to make that masterpiece portrait? No, it's not what I do. Am I going to try to do that? No, that's not what I do. Do I use color combinations that sometimes clash with each other? Yes. And I do it on purpose. That's what I do. Do I make paintings that are, for lack of a better term, so simple they're actually hard to make? Yeah. Some of the stuff that I do is so simple that it's actually hard to make. I describe it like that in my mind. It really is. The simplicity in it is difficult to recreate. I look at some of the stuff that's on the wall right behind me, in fact, in the video. I mean, granted, the one that's, the one that's on my, that's there, that one that I'm pointing at above it, that one right there. If I had a chance, gun to head, somebody said, make that painting again, exactly the way you did it, the answer would be like, pull the trigger. There's no way I could recreate that. I just can't. There's no way. Why can't I? Because it was a random thought and random colors. And truthfully, my box full of art supplies, I don't even know if the color combination that I used for that painting, first of all, I don't know if I still have that paint. Second of all, I don't know if I didn't just mix a couple different paints in order to make that paint color on some of those spots. Some of them could be a mix, some of them could not be. And when you go to that point, it's just like, it's so impossible to recreate because of the simple fact that when I mix paint, that's another thing. I don't measure it. I just say, okay, a little dab of this, a little dab of that, a little dab of this, a little dab of that. Mix it together. Oh, I like that. Or, too dark, too light. I don't essentially have an exact way to recreate the color that I'm using. So when there is a color like that that shows up, or a situation that works like that with the paint, I'm not going to be able to recreate it exactly because I really don't know what I did. But that's part of the mastery. The fact that I look at it and I say, yeah, that's right. That's good. I mean, example, like even this one right there, when I made that one, I had completely finished it. It was done. And I thought that it needed something else. And in the process of thinking like that, I waited about a month. And then I realized, not only did I realize that it was done, but I realized that the way that I wanted it to be viewed is the way that it's sitting there now. There was a time when I first made it, after that month before I decided it was finished, it was the other way. It was facing, the short end was up and the longer ends were on the sides. It wasn't in that direction that you see behind me now. I had it the other way. And then over that month period of time, I literally had a week of looking at the painting in each direction. And this is the first direction that I had it that made me say, yeah, this is it. Absolutely it. I turned it the first way, like I said, with the short ends. In other words, this side was the bottom, that side was the top, and I left it like that for about 10 days. And the way it is right now, I only did that for about 3 days, and I realized this is the way it needs to be viewed. But truthfully, that's the difference. I mean, the time it takes to put these things together, some of them, I have paintings that took me, example, the Phoenix Eye right there. That guy, that took me about 2 weeks to finish. And it looks real simple. And it really is, but a combination of the way that I was feeling when I was making it, I had mixed up that black. That's not full on black. It's a couple different color paints, a couple different blacks to make that black, both in the eye and on the outskirts of the eye. And I had to think about it. And that's what it was. And other times, like let's say over there, which one is that? That's spring, or no, that's summer. Is it spring or summer? Either way, it's one that's part of the season series. That painting took me all of 10 minutes. Not gonna lie. I like the color combination. It just made me think, and I just finished it in 10 minutes. Now, amongst that, I had to decide what kind of tools to use to make these paintings. Not every one of these uses a paintbrush. Some of them use a squeegee. Some of them use a squeegee in part or entirely. Some of them use a toothbrush. Some of my favorite paintings, I actually use a toothbrush to do certain pieces of it, if not the whole. I even have a painting, I believe it was in the Silver series, can't remember which one it was, but I actually used the bottom of a soda bottle in order to paint certain sections of that painting. Now, if it hadn't been for me working on these paintings in general for 3 years and getting a grasp of not what I was doing, and that's what made me realize I had mastered it, because anybody can put paint to canvas. Anybody can do it. But in order for me to understand the true mastery of what I do as far as my work goes, it was understanding what I do, why I do it. That's the step that made it become mastery. Understanding why I painted that painting the way I did. Understanding that it wasn't just, I'm just slap some paint on here and that's what it is. No, there was a method to my madness. I had a vision in my head of what I thought it was supposed to look like and how I needed to go about getting it there. And that's the thing that gave me a mastery of it. Did I go to school to paint? No. Should I have gone to school to paint? Yes and no. If I took an art class, I would have probably been more educated as far as the type of painting that I was doing, maybe measured a little bit more on paint, understood shadows and contrast a little better. But I had this incident happen in an English class when I was in Mercer County College. My grades were not great, and it was because the teacher was doing the thing that really drove me nuts. And it's just the way that I'm wired, I guess. When it comes to other people's art and artistic stuff, I have limited opinions on it. Like, if somebody asks me why somebody does something in a book or why they do it in a painting or something like that, my answer is I don't care. And it's not to be rude, but I don't care. The reason why is because my mind is all about, do I like it or don't I like it? If I see somebody put something out there that's just incredibly amazing, that just takes my breath away, I like it. Whether that person took 20 minutes to make that painting or sculpture or write that book, or if somebody took 15 years to do it. Their process to me is, it's somewhat interesting. It's fascinating. It is. But when it comes to that stuff, the end result is what gets me. It's like, man, you could have put literally one dot on a canvas and had been working on that one dot for 30 years. But if that one dot is what you wanted to put out there, and you can explain to yourself why you did it, you don't have to convince me that it's good. Because the first thing that I say about even this show is, my show is for an audience of one. If I don't like it, it'll never see the light of day. Now, if you creating something and you don't like it, why did you make it? So when it came down to it, back to the English teacher, she was talking to me about my reviewing these stories that were going on, and I was like, I just not doesn't really matter. And she ended up at that point having a really bad time because her mother had died, and I just wrote her a poem. Here you go. And then she read it, and she was like, yo, you're actually really good at this. You really are. I understand why you don't necessarily like the assignments. You tell me what you think of it, because I understand what your process is. You have something that you're really good at, and it's hard for you to understand the other stuff. And from that point on, my grades actually went up after writing her a poem from about her the passing of her mother. It was completely changed. Like, my grades went from being D's, and I ended up getting a B in the class because she realized, okay, you're fairly good at it. Which goes back to the point. If somebody is to make something, like I said, and it's really, really good, I'm going to be like, okay, this is really, really good. I like it. If it's something that I don't like, no, I don't like it. It's just not my style, not my thing, and I can't really come up with a reason to say why or why not sometimes. It just is. And there's certain artists that you see and you're like, I love it. And then there's stuff like, even actors for that way. I am unfortunately cursed and burdened with the fact that I love Brad Pitt's movies. I just do. I do. Detective Mills, Achilles, the Invisible Guy in Deadpool. The Traveler in Snatch. But then there's Kevin Hart, who never even cracks a smile for me. I don't ever even smile when he's doing his stuff. He's just not my guy. But that's how I can sort of, in a nutshell, say that over time I believe I've mastered the art of, well, art. Looking at the clock, do I have time to go into some of these other ones? Let me see what's in here. Maybe I'll hold these other ones back. These two for a different subject for a different time. I think that's what I'm going to do. Bear with me for a minute. Because I did the one about driving that I ad-libbed completely, didn't even have it on my notes at all until just a little while ago. I'm going to hold off on these two here, and I'm going to go up to the very top, which is probably the thing that I believe that undisputedly I've mastered above many things, and I am unapologetic when I say it. Don't know who you are, don't know how you can bake, but I promise you my apple pie is better. It just is. Sorry. It's better than yours. I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. My apple pie is better than yours. Period. 100% better than yours. It just is. It's a breaks. Sorry. Have I had it in a contest? No. Do I need to? No. Because it's better. It's purely better. And I'm going to explain to you, and now I definitely sound a little bit narcissistic when I talk about my apple pie, but I believe I have earned that right. And I'm going to tell you why I have earned that right to say that I have mastered the apple pie. Without giving away my secret recipe, and Lord knows, if there is a recipe for anything that I am absolutely never going to give to anybody, except for one person. There is one person who knows how to make my apple pie, and she's a little forgetful. And she doesn't really, I don't know if she remembers that I told her how to do it. It's my daughter Aurora. She wanted to learn how to bake and cook and stuff like that. So I gave her, she's the only human on this planet who right now, who's alive, who knows what's going into my apple pies. In fact, the only other person who saw me as I was in the process of perfecting my apple pie has passed away, and that was my grandmother. And strangely enough, she was my test subject for a lot of these things. And I'm going to say it before you do. It wasn't her being the test subject that killed her. Just let you know, it wasn't. Just to make sure that those jokes are gone. Okay. How did it begin? And why am I so convinced that my apple pie is the greatest apple pie that has ever been created? Let's start off with 1999. I had just finished up working at a grocery store called Edwards. Now, before that, I had worked at ShopRite. All of this is in Manchester, New Jersey. And I was in the bakery department. And what I would do most of the time in the bakery department was I would set up the preps that were being baked off for the night before. And on occasion, I would have to actually bake if they needed something extra. For example, if there was cookies and we ran out of cookies, I would throw some cookies in and bake them off. Sometimes they would have pudding cakes that weren't completed. I would bake them off. And then, of course, they had pies. And they had this massive pie sale a couple times a year where they would sell pies. And the one that obviously sold the most was apple pie. Now, they smelled great. Put them in the oven, let them go. And they looked okay. But the thing is, they were frozen. And I tried one a couple times because you're in the bakery. And I was like, it's okay. It's all right. And my mind was at, during that whole point in time when I was in the bakery department, there were little cakes that they would sell. one slice essentially, and they were good. And during that time, I was looking at that stuff and I said, you know what? I can do better. I can make a better apple pie. I can make a better cake. Like the one cake that they made was called a Brownie Beast. And they had a peanut butter cupcake, which I love that. Chocolate cake, peanut butter, simple. Brownie Beast was 2 slices of white cake with, you guessed it, a brownie in the middle. They iced it up. I changed it up, and maybe I'll make one of them. I haven't done that in a long time. And after thinking about it, even though being a gym rat again, I wouldn't eat the whole thing, or even maybe more than a little slice. But the apple pie is the thing that really focused me, because they get their pies in bulk, frozen, put them in the oven, heat them up, and then they're gone. Now, with those pies, they are pre-made and they're not baked at all. They're totally frozen, but the filling is made, the crust is made, and it just needs to be baked. And that's what we do. You bake them for like an hour. And like I said, for what they were, they're okay. But I knew that I could do better than that. And so, in 1999, I said, I'm going to do better than that. The first thing I did was I made myself a vow, and I told it to my grandmother, who was at home at the time, and I said, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to make the ultimate apple pie. But in order to make this pie, I need to make the filling, because I don't think the crust matters that much as the filling does. If the filling is not right, the crust is irrelevant. And that was my philosophy. Now, I said, I am not going to put my filling into a pie until I've mastered that filling. So the crust was never going to be a pie until I got the filling right. And I would make several trips to my grandmother's house with many different apples, which is the key. Not just one kind of apple. Everybody would go, oh, the Granny Smith is the pie apple. It generally is. It's a little tart, not sweet. You put sugar in it, but it's still a little tart. Now, after considerable trial and error between the years of 1999 and I guess it was 2005 or 6, maybe even a little bit later. Yeah, it was 2006, 2007. Yeah, even 2007. I would still go to my grandmother's house and I would get a couple different types of apples and I would make up this filling, and then I'd put it in something. I'd make a cake. That was usually my vehicle of choice. I'd taste the pie filling and I'd be like, it's alright. And then I'd make a cake with it. And that's how I went with it. For all those years, I would go and I would make it as a cake. I would use it as a topping. I would use all kinds of stuff. Just eat it straight up, but it would never go into a pie filling. And in 2009, my grandmother passed, and I stopped really trying to make that pie filling because I hadn't gotten it yet. Now, it had been 10 years at this point. It had been 10 years, from 99 to 2009. And I had been going in and out, trying different combinations to see if I could get this pie filling right. I just couldn't do it. It wasn't up to my standard. It wasn't the best pie filling ever. And that was after 10 years. Now, I had said before that there's a point in time where you just sort of give up, because I was like, all right, I've been doing this for long enough. I'm going to go try something else. And so I didn't necessarily give up. It was always in the back of my mind. And I was always reworking the recipe, and I was always tweaking this here or there. And then I heard somebody say something that was pivotal, and it just made what I can only describe as a quantum leap in my pie quest. It was the wife of Pastor Richard Bell, Ruth Bell, who then became a pastor. She was really good at making apple pies. She had her recipe and she did her thing. And the one thing that I was told by her was, you don't use just one kind of apple, use different kind of apples. Use multiple apples. And I'm like, how many? It was like usually like 3 or 4. I was like, 3 or 4. Because there was a point in time when I would try 2 different apples. I would always, mentally, I would always use at least one Granny Smith in the mix because I wanted to have that slight bit of tradition. So the Granny Smith was there. But then I would try, like, I don't know why I was so bent on Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, and then Macintosh. Then all of a sudden, you started seeing Pink Ladies in the store and Jazz, and I would start using some of those, and I'd start mixing and going back and forth. And then the apples that came from the laboratory started showing up, and things changed greatly. When they came up with the Honeycrisp, I was like, okay. This was 2013 that I found a Honeycrisp apple, and everything changed. I then used the Honeycrisp, which, because I knew that my seasoning mix was right on point. I had the right seasoning. And the problem was, I needed the Honeycrisp. And that was the main thing. Now, did I use all Honeycrisp? No. Did I use 4 different types of apple? No. I bought 5 different types of apple. And the reason being, because I became a lot pickier with my apples. And that was the difference. I would get 5 or 6 different apples, knowing that I was going to put 5 of them in my pie. And the game plan was, I would cut the apple up like I was getting ready to put it in the pie itself, and then I would test it. I would take bites out of the core. And if the core was right and it tasted good, then that apple was approved. And that was the final piece, because I have a stringent requirement from the pie, the apples go in my pie, which is why it would be so difficult if I was to mass produce my pie, because if it was going to be to my standard, the first thing that has to happen is the apple has to be flawless. It can have no blemish when you look at it on the outside. It's got to be shiny and clean. It's got to be perfect. Then it's got to be the right size for the type of apple that it is. It's got to be a good size apple for that on the outside. It can be perfect, but it can be too small. It won't be any good. It could be gigantic, but if it has a couple little spots on it, no good. And then if it doesn't have the core taste right, if the core doesn't taste good, that means the apple itself is no good. It won't be acceptable to my apple pie. Won't go in. And so, like I said, I would have 6 different apples with the idea of putting in 5. And what I would do is, I would taste the core, and if the core was acceptable, that apple would then be allowed to be in my pie. And I would go through that process for all 6 apples, and then I would decide which of the 6 were going to be in the pie. It was only going to be 5 out of the 6 at the time. Only 5 out of the 6. And the one that was automatically in was going to be the Granny Smith. That's the only absolute. Granny Smith, the only absolute, because like I said, the traditional apple pie was Granny Smith. So that one I actually will even admit that when I was selling my pies, if the Granny Smith wasn't right, I would go to a different store to get another one. I wouldn't even continue the test unless the Granny Smith was right. If that one was wrong, like I said, I would go from ShopRite to Acme to, at the time, Pathmart was still available, and then there was Giant. And the most I went to, in order to get the right Granny Smith, I went to 3 different stores in order to get the right Granny Smith. That was the right size, color was good, and tasted good on the inside, on the core. And it took me 3 different stores to go get that one. I'm a stickler for this, and that's one of the reasons why I've mastered this pie, because I'm not going to compromise at all. 0. Now, the other 5 apples, those ones are subject to the test inside the store and then the core. If the core is wrong, then they will be excluded. And in order to get my number that I want, no less than 5 different types of apple. Preferably 5. If I can find 6, well, 6 it is. But 5 for certain. Absolute certain. And that's why I would get at least 6 different apples, so that if one of the ones didn't, let's just say the Pink Lady was a little off, but the Jazz was perfect, the Pink Lady gets scrapped, and it's Jazz, Granny Smith, and whatever else would go into it. And so once I've mastered that, in the really thing, when I figured out all that together, and I got that bit of information from Pastor Bell's wife, who became Pastor Bell herself after a point, I then finally put it in a cross. And it was and is something I will stand on to this day. The best apple pie that you could possibly get. Now, am I going to tell you my exact mix of seasonings? No. Am I even going to tell you what the seasonings are? No. That is a secret that only me and one other person knows. And like I said, that's Aurora. She knows it, and she can't even remember what it is, unfortunately, but she does know it. And truthfully, the seasoning combination with the apple selection, that's what makes it perfect. And I don't even call them apple pies, because anybody who ever bought any cookies or pies from me knows that the entire business that I created was called Phil's Pie because of that pie. And as a result of that, I don't just call my apple pie an apple pie. It's called a Phil's Pie. That is the Phil's Pie. The apple pie is the Phil's Pie. Now, I've made what I believe is the worst pie in the world ever. So it goes both ways. That's why I feel that my apple pie is the absolute best apple pie ever. And I'll also, on the side note, say that the sweet potato pie that I made was garbage. The worst pie ever made was my sweet potato pie. It was the worst pie ever made. So, as Shannon Sharp would say, 2 things can be true. I make the best apple pie anybody could ever make, and I make the worst sweet potato pie that anybody could ever make. Those 2 things are both true. And as a result of that, I made 1 sweet potato pie ever, and it will go down in history. Well, actually, it wasn't 1, it was like 3 or 4. That same mix. And here's my apology to everybody who ever ate that sweet potato pie. I'm sorry for the digestional inconvenience. I am sorry that you had to endure that torment. And as penance, I have never made another sweet potato pie. And the people who had it, they liked it. But I didn't like it. Maybe it's just that I think that sweet potato pie just isn't any good, or it's because that sweet potato pie just wasn't any good. I personally think it was because it wasn't any good. And that's where I get my I guess you could say, my tendencies are, if I don't like the way it comes out, it never leaves the kitchen, and it looked good. It smelled like sweet potato pie, but like I said, I am not a sweet potato pie person. But the apple pie that I made was absolute perfection, and that's where I have mastered pie. I've done peach pie, which is decent. It's good, solid, hold up in a fight, I'll say, but none better than the apple pie. That's my absolute best pie. I perfected it. I've mastered it, and I will dare anybody to question whether my pie is not outstanding. It is. It is. But like I said, I would never be able to sell it in mass production because you have to try every individual core. You have to try. They can't be. They have to be perfect on the outside. They have to be ready, over the top, good. They can't. There's so many. The standard is so high. Like when you go to a mass-produced pie, a lot, especially with apples, they just go. They cut them. They peel them. They cook them. They go in there. They put all the stuff that they're gonna put in there and they just move on. So there's going to be points and times where the apple quality isn't going to be the same, the apple type isn't going to be the same, because that's another thing. Like I said, I'll use 5 to 6 apples in a pie, and never will it be the same because the ratio will always be different. Granted, when you're making the filling, the juices from each pie, or for each apple rather, all melt together because they become one when you're making when you're making the pie filling. So the juices are all going to be there, but the individual apples themselves could very well be different because you're mixing all those different apples together after you cut them up. So it's not going to be one slice of pie isn't going to taste necessarily the same as the slice that's in that same pie, because the apple distribution is going to be slightly different. Now, does it mean it's going to make one slice taste better than the other? No, absolutely not, because they're so balanced. But will one pie taste different than another? You might get a little more Granny Smith in one pie, and you might have a little bit of Cosmic Crisp in the other that's a little bit more. So one could be slightly sweeter, but either way, they're perfect because of the unity of all the pie, all the apples together. Now, that's the thing that I've mastered over anything else, was the apple pie. I can certainly say that I may be good at other things, but amongst the things that I spoke on, I think that between driving, painting, and making apple pies, if I had to guess that there was anything that I was better at than those things, I don't really know what it would be. Because truly, those 3 things, I think I can stand up to most people and say, yeah, I'm about as good as that gets. Which goes to my thought process of, well, I think I probably ought to make a pie. I was gonna make one for Thanksgiving, but I just didn't feel pie. But I'll tell you right now, maybe for Christmas I might make one. Well, here comes the only thing I will say about my pie recipe. It's multiple. In other words, the pie that I make, the ratio that comes out is one filling. When I make the filling, it does 2 pies. So I wouldn't just make one, I'd make 2. And that's the way that kind of works out. But on that note, I think that I've said enough about things that I've mastered, and I'm gonna ring the bell and say, hey, that's the end of the episode. as far as the main event goes. Phoenix, say hi. Say hi, Phoenix. He came in because he was ready to tell him what he's mastered. I don't know. He's good at that stuff. Phoenix. Alright. Main event is over. Main event is over. And now it is time to go to. Where are we going to go? We're going to go to the picks. We're going to go to the spear. I think we're going to go to. What do you say, Phoenix? The spear of the week or the picks? I think we'll go to the picks first. Because the picks make me want to spear somebody anyway. And like I had said last episode, I had literally picked all 3 games that were going on for the Thanksgiving game. As a result, my week was bad because I had picked the Packers, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. All 3 lost. Packers got beat by the Lions. Oh, wait, no, I picked the Lions, rather. I picked the Lions. Lions got beat by the Packers 31-30. No, 31-24. Chiefs lost to the Cowboys 31-28. And the Ravens lost to the Bengals 32-14. That one really blew my mind. But the other games I was right on about, well, Denver, there's literally not much you could say about that. 27-26, close as it comes, but it's still a win either way. And then my 49ers, I knew they were going to beat the Browns, and they actually beat them by a little bit more than I expected. 26-28. Now, for week 14, the games that I had picked, I got the Cowboys 35, Lions 20, Commanders over the Vikings 24-13. I think that can work. The Bengals, I'm going to call that really, Joe Burrow is healthy because that's the difference in the game that happened with the Ravens the week before. I think that the Bengals have enough firepower where they can take down the Bills. I think that's going to happen. I'm going 27-21. The Texans are moving up. I think they're getting in stride. I think they could beat the Chiefs because they can pass rush. I think that's 28-21. Texans, Eagles. I think they're going to slide again. San Diego Superchargers 24-20 over the Eagles. That's my week 14 picks. Now the real extended picks. Week 15 20-point defeat for the Raiders. I think this is the game that's going to help the Eagles get back to winning ways, because if you've been losing a few weeks, the best thing that can happen is you get to play the Raiders. I believe the Broncos are going to beat the Packers 24-21. A close game. Broncos are winning way too close. They got to be careful. I think they're going to get the win now. 49ers and Titans, need I say more? 28-10, 49ers. They're way better, and they're going to win their 10th game. That's really important for their playoff push. I'm sure that's going to happen against the miserable Titans. Cowboys and Vikings, I see the Cowboys winning pretty significantly. 35-17, I think the Vikings, they just don't have it. And they're going to show everybody that they don't have it. Chiefs, again, are going to fall, and I think this is the one that's going to take them out of the playoffs in Week 15. Their playoff hopes are going to be dashed, I believe, because their own division mate, again, the San Diego Superchargers, are going to defeat them 27-20. Now, back to Week 14, and I'm going to go all the way down again. Cowboys over the Lions, Commanders over the Vikings, Bengals over the Bills, Texans over the Chiefs, and Chargers over the Eagles. That's week 14. Week 15, Eagles will get back on the winning ways against the Raiders. The Broncos are going to beat the Packers. The 49ers are going to have their way with the Titans. The Cowboys will beat the Vikings. And last but not least, the Chargers are going to beat the Chiefs. And I am going to predict that that's going to be the end for the Chiefs in the playoffs this year. Okay. Whew. That was really good stuff. It's time for the Spear of the Week. The Spear of the Week this week can only be one thing. Just one. And that is... Let's get a drink real fast before I get to that. Sorry. Oh boy. Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is the Spear of the Week. Why is he the Spear of the Week? He has 19 sacks after he got Brock Purdy. That man signed a huge contract because he wanted to play for the stinky Cleveland Browns. Now, granted, he didn't know that the 49ers were going to cut Brandon Ayuk, freeing up multiple millions of dollars in cap space that they're going to be able to use next year. He could have been a winner, but he, I believe, fits this remark. He likes being a big fish in a small pond, period. Now, if he were to go to play for the 49ers and next year be in a devastating lineup with him and Nick Bosa being your primary edge rushers, and then Mykal Williams, when he gets back from his injury, which is going to be a little bit later than Bosa because he hurt himself a little bit later in the year, you have another guy who can be put into a rotation of just devastation. You got Collins, who's doing really good at the defensive tackle as a rookie, and then you mix up Bosa, Garrett, Myles Garrett, and Mykal Williams at the edge. You can put them on either side, move them around. That would be a lethal combination, and I'm 100% convinced Myles Garrett would get a Super Bowl ring. But instead, he decided that he'll go buy himself some giant ring with all the money he just made, and he'll never even sniff a playoff game. And for that, I want to spear him because I think that his greed may have cost the 49ers a Super Bowl. And at the very least, he definitely cost himself one. Myles Garrett, you're the Spear of the Week. And on that note, we're going to shut down the show. I want to once again reiterate the fact that the show of things that I've mastered is really a piece to make people think, to make you all think. I know that I've mastered these things that I spoke on, and I believe that you have something out there that you've mastered, but you're not either aware of it, or maybe you are, but you just don't embrace it as much as you should. And I believe that you should go ahead, embrace it. Be proud of the fact that you're good at something. There are many people who are not as good at that thing as you are, and you need to just be proud of that thing. I tell you now, when you figure it out and you know what it is and you start doing it with the appreciation that you realize that you are that good at that thing, you're going to be better at it. At the end of the day, you're going to be better at that thing. I can promise you that. But of course, if you want to do yourself something that would be incredibly good, check me out on Instagram at Phil Henderson 5102. Join us, as I like to say, join us on our Facebook group. Join us. We're nearly 100 strong, which is more than I ever expected. And of course, there's always room for one more. And I say, join us. Join us. This channel at Phil the Lip on YouTube. Subscribe. Check out all the rest of the stuff that I've got. And that's just the YouTube stuff. There's also things that you can find as what I like to call my archive, which is where it all began on Spotify. It's where the archives of the Lip are. Go check those out. There's still plenty of great episodes on there that you can listen to. That's really about it today. I'm going to go into the words of wisdom because I think that these words are some that I've used before, but I think I want to use them again because I think that there's a little bit of context here for this episode that actually works with this. And here they are. When looking back at your past, what could have been and what should have been don't matter. When looking forward at your future, looking forward at the future, what could be or what should be can't be known with any certainty. All we can truly have is now. And what we make of it. One more time. When looking back at your past, what could have been and what should have been don't matter. When looking at the future, what could be or what should be can't be known with any certainty. All we truly have is now. And what we make of it. Find that thing that you're good at, that you've mastered, and continue to work on it. On that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.